political panel with their thoughts on that. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us. Rick is our Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital, and Jeannie, of course, Democracy Visiting Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Why don't you pick up the conversation from here, Jeannie, because the idea of maintenance, the idea of the business that must be done after the cameras turn away and Air Force One is back here in Washington will be a very complex series of challenges. Is this administration up to it?
It will. I mean, it's going to depend on how engaged they are going forward. And certainly we know the administration has a lot on their hands and on the table domestically as well. And of course, as you just mentioned, they've also got this war in Ukraine and a meeting with Zelensky on Friday. But that said, I think we heard, I think right before the president spoke, when we heard from the president of Egypt, Sisi, he said something about closing a painful chapter in human history, certainly true, and a commitment to a two-state solution for the Palestinian and Israeli people. And I underscore that because he said that right before President Trump got up to speak. And that is something that we have heard that the Israeli government, as it is now put together, and as it is now obviously facing elections, so it could change, they have firmly rejected that notion from the start of this war. So I think as we think about what's going to happen going forward, we have to remember how far apart these two people and groups are. And it is not just Hamas and the Israeli government. It is also the Arab nations that have joined together with the president in terms of finding a way forward in peace. And so there is a long way to go here. I share Hagar's great excitement for the day, but I also think we need to be very cautious. The president is taking a victory lap. He deserves it, but there is a long way to go here when you hear the main partner, the president of Egypt, talk about a two-state solution.
Well, that's really interesting, Jeannie. Rick, I asked Hagar as well about Benjamin Netanyahu's political future. Once we're into phase two, assuming that this ceasefire continues, what will be his political reality at home?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting that President Trump turned to the president of Israel and said, "Hey, how about a pardon for this guy? He knows something about pardons." But I do think that that is a significant distraction to the rebuilding of Gaza and to the completion of the peace agreement. In other words, good news, war's over, killing will stop by and large, and Israel will be able to return to some level of normalcy. They won't be sitting in air raid shelters all night long. And knowing the Israeli people, they're going to want to talk politics. They're going to want to find out what's the future of Israel. And as I looked at the coverage of the president's speech to the Knesset, you could see a dozen potential candidates for prime minister sitting around applauding, because this actually unleashes a new era of Israeli life, which is a return to the hyper-political interests of the people there and a post-Netanyahu future. I don't think anybody really believes that after this, there's a role for Bibi Netanyahu as a future leader of Israel post this agreement. He'll get credit for this agreement, he'll get credit for security, but at this point, they'll be looking across for new leadership.
Is that how you see it, Jeannie, in lieu of a pardon? What could be next for Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yeah, that was quite a moment when the President Trump said that today about why don't you pardon this guy, and the look on Benjamin Netanyahu's face was priceless. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is facing, and we've always known he was facing, very serious challenges at home. I mean, look before October 7th, the large-scale demonstrations on the street in Israel. After October 7th, the focus was on, retribution, getting the hostages back. There's a lot of anger in Israel, understandably so, that the feeling that Benjamin Netanyahu could have made this deal long before and did not do that. And the polls are reflecting that. That said, Benjamin Netanyahu, who describes himself, I think rightly so, as maybe the most liberal member of this coalition, and he's a conservative guy, I think speaks volumes about how divided the Israeli government and the Israeli people are. And I think his future depends an awful lot on what we see happen in Gaza and in the West Bank. Again, I go back to the fact Israel had committed to getting the hostages back. That is now done. But to destroying Hamas and absolutely a commitment to no Palestinian state. The president, Egypt, others are suggesting otherwise on those last two fronts, and Hamas already active on the streets of Gaza City. So that is going to put a whole new level of concern there. How do you get a political and a security force in there that can keep us moving forward to the phase two? That is really going to be a challenge. And if Benjamin Netanyahu is able to maintain his position going forward, it's likely going to be because they are once again at war with Hamas.
Fascinating conversation with Jeannie Sheikh and Rick Davis. I want to thank you both for staying for a little bit of overtime here. We wanted to hear the president speak and get some time for all of the dust to settle here. By the way, he's on his way to the airport, capping a very brief trip to the region. Israel and Egypt back in his own bed this evening in the White House. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Sheikh will be back with us on the late edition of Balance of Power. We're going to have a lot more to talk about. That starts at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And part of our coverage will include a conversation with Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts, of course, a Marine Corps combat veteran who also serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee. We'll have more to add in this conversation. And what is also day 13 of the federal government shutdown. Civilian federal workers are now going without pay. The military may have a stopgap before they go without pay on Wednesday. We're going to have more on that straight ahead on Bloomberg TV and radio.